Hey everyone, welcome back to the Small Town Nerdcast. I am your host, Brian, and it is now week 3 of our Halloween Podfest, or October Spooky Story Podfest that we've been doing this month, where I've been telling you guys a bunch of Texas ghost stories that I've remembered or heard of or been told myself, and I wanted to share with you guys because I think it's fun. It's fun to hear ghost stories or tall tales in or around places that you are very familiar with or live, that kind of stuff. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. So I forgot what we shared the first week, but I know last week we talked about just a bunch of the lights that people see around Texas, like the Marfa lights. And then there were 2 other ones in Bailey's Light, which is the one near me. And man, there was one other, couldn't remember it. But anywho, so hopefully you guys have been enjoying those stories this week. We're shifting gears a little bit, but hopefully you still find it enjoyable, entertaining, and maybe just a little bit spooky. This week, we're talking about the murder steer. So if you guys aren't too familiar with the murder steer, it is a cow. Also has the name of the murder maverick, and this cow, the steer, has been known to show up whenever there are arguments or when something bad is about to happen. Basically, it's a bad omen. If you ever see the murder steer, it's not a good sign. You should probably fear for your life. In the past, and what people have recorded seeing of when this mysterious murder steer shows up is either someone was killed, someone was gravely wronged, or someone who had a lot of, like, a guilty conscience would sometimes come across the murder steer. And it's been cited as multiple different ways as being ghastly in a way, like not a full figure, but enough to notice it's a cow. Some said it's huge, some say it's like the normal size, but all of them have reported seeing one detail that is the same on all sightings of the murder steer, and that is the word murder written across its left flank, like a brand. And it's kind of funny and kind of interesting because the reason why this story started and where this story's origins come from deals with a maverick, which is what they call a cow with no brand. And it's kind of funny because the term maverick also originated around around my hometown. The guy who was a cattle rancher, I think he was from up north, inherited some land down here near the Gulf of Mexico, and was notorious for not branding his own cows. Like, he just did. I don't know if he just didn't see the point of it or was too lazy to do it. And his name was actually Maverick. Like, that was his last name. And so when people would see his cattle or see cattle with no brands, they would say, "Oh, that's a Maverick. That's a Maverick cow." And so that's where the term actually originates from, which is kind of funny in my eyes. And that's just a little bit of extra Texas history for you guys to kind of get you out of the spooky manner, because I know you're super terrified of this story right now. But yeah, so as the story goes, there was a big cattle drive. This is like in the late 1800s, like 1880 sometime in that point. Actually, I have it pulled up here so I can actually give you a better idea, try to build a scene for you guys. But yeah, so just way back in the day, actually it says here it was in 1896 is when this actually happened. So yeah, it's not just like, oh, this is a legend of our story. Like, this is actually something that happened in history that you can document, much like Bailey and the light and all that stuff. Like, this is another one that actually has a legitimate claim to it. And so in Brewster County, which is just outside of Alpine, Texas, there was I guess what they would call, I'd call it a roundup, but I guess they called it a cow gather back in the day. Um, it looks like the term roundup was actually made famous in movies and not something that people actually used while being ranchers and cowhands. But so Brewster County, they're rounding up a bunch of cattle, and one of the guys who owns cattle there is Henry Poe. Henry Poe brands his cattle with HHP. You had some other guys there, and then you had this guy named Gilliland. There you go. I think I said that right. Or Gilliland. And he was a representative for an absentee ranch owner. And his job was to gather the ranch owner who wasn't there, gather up his cattle for him, kind of like as a stand-in for this guy. So while they're rounding up all the cattle and trying to separate them into their groups, the ranchers all come across a maverick calf, a calf that had no mother that it could be seen. Because normally what they would do, if the calf was with another cow, like its mother, they would brand it or take it with that branded cow. So the branded cow would represent the brand for the calf because that was its mother, which would happen, these cows would have babies and the babies don't come out branded. I don't know if you know how branding works with a hot metal iron and to the skin. But so Poe or Henry Poe believed that was his cow. It must have come from one of his that was pregnant, and so that belonged to him. Gillian, however, didn't agree with that. He thought it should just stay in the group because they weren't sure whose it was, and it's not with a mother, and maybe it would find its mother and they could decide later. Well, Henry didn't really take too kindly to this, so he started kind of getting riled up and kind of started an argument, and they went their separate ways for now. But Henry kind of had this in his mind. So he goes around, talks to some of the other ranchers around there, and eventually he's able to acquire a pistol because he didn't really carry a pistol. In fact, what's funny about, or not funny, but what's interesting, Henry Powell only had one arm. And so I believe he lost it in some kind of fight or some war. So he ends up finding a revolver and decides to go up to Gillian and shoot him because he was like, "Who are you? You don't own any cows here. You're just some piece of shit showing up for someone who couldn't even bother." So a gunfight ensues, and Henry shooting at Gillen and missing, and Gillen shooting back and missing because one guy's got one arm and the other guy, I guess, is just a terrible shot. Eventually, Gillen is able to get the better of Henry and shoot him and kill him. After this happens, because I guess no one did anything to stop it or anything, Gillen takes off and runs out to West Texas to avoid law enforcement because he is the odd man out, and everyone's going to blame him for killing Henry Poe, even though it was Poe who started the argument and who shot first. And this is actual documented that he shot first. This isn't just a tall tale. Eventually, Texas Rangers catch up to Gillen, and instead of just admitting hey, I shouldn't have killed him and stuff, it was an argument gone south, he ends up fighting back against the Texas Rangers, and eventually the Texas Rangers shoot and kill Gillen. And it was a really crazy thing that happened, and this is not just in the same day. Gillen was on the run for actually quite a while before Texas Rangers caught up to him and killed him in a gunfight. But between that time, the ranchers who were with the roundup took the calf that was the cause of this whole argument because they were upset. I think it was Henry Poe's son who did it. They ended up branding the word murder on the side of this calf, on the left side, because that's normally where you put your brands. But on the right side, they also put the year that it happened. I think they put 1889, or that some of the stories that talk about this cow or the murder steer say that it has the year of 1889 on it. And what's crazy is, so this poor calf gets blamed for everything. It goes on to just be left out in the wild with no one to care for it or anything, and they just leave it at that. Shortly after, you hear these crazy reports of when like people are murdered or things happen out on the ranch. There's a shadowy cow that shows up, and sometimes it's red, sometimes it's black. But like I said, every time you can see the words murder burned into the skin on its left flank, which kind of weird, kind of creepy, man. So if you're out at night and you've got a guilty conscience, or you're holding on to some unlawful doings, maybe watch out, because the murder steer might be coming for you. What's even creepier, though, is there is another version of this story that's been going around that I found online, where the murder steer is a little more responsible for the deaths that happen out. And the murder steer, although I don't know what kind, in this story, it claims that it's a longhorn. And if you know anything about longhorns, they have, you've guessed it, very long horns. And they're quite sharp, man. And so, as some stories say, that the murder steer to take vengeance out and claim justice against those that have committed crimes, are very heinous acts. There you go. That's the word I was looking for. I will actually impale people on his horns and carry them off to hell or wherever else the murder steer resides. I don't know, man. So I think it's a kind of interesting story. It's kind of funny. It's one of those more like out there ones to me. But like I said, what's kind of funny is like there is actual like things like this actually happened. There was a horrible dispute where one guy shot and killed the other, and the other one eventually dies by law enforcement. And they did, in fact, brand this poor calf with the words murder. Like that actually happened. Whether now the like spirit of vengeance of this, like the Ghost Rider of Texas, is running around with this murder steer, like that's, I don't know. Thankfully, I do not commit unlawful acts or have like any type of conscience that holds that type of guilt. So I don't think I will have any run-ins with the murder steer. But can you say the same? Just think about it next time you're driving around the plains and grasslands of Texas, or even in the desert, because nowhere is safe when the murder steer is looking for you. I'm sorry. But hopefully you enjoyed that little side story. It was one I wanted to share, and if we're going to keep doing this every year, I can't give you all the best stories. We gotta, not that this one is any less murder steer. If you're listening, you're not less than any other thing. But yeah, so that will wrap things up for this week, and next week we'll have our final and maybe most known Texas ghost story, or like most maybe famous or most heard of. I don't know. We'll figure it out next week, or I'll let you guys decide next week how this one unfolds for y'all. So hopefully you guys are still enjoying this. Is there any ghost stories that you've heard of, or anything you want to share with? We can talk about that. And after October, we have November, which is going to be kind of like back to the normal things. And then we walk into December, which has Christmas and New Year's. So we'll maybe do something special with that. I don't know. We'll have to see. But that's all that I have for you guys this week. And hopefully you have been enjoying enough to share and like, rate, and review on either Apple Podcast or on Podbean or wherever you're listening to my podcast at. Hopefully you guys are enjoying. I know I enjoy seeing the listens and any interactions that I get with everyone. So please keep it coming. If you want, or please, not if you want, but please hit me up on any of my social medias on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook. Everything can be found at Small Town Nerdcast. Some of them, I think Twitter, I couldn't fit it all. So it's SMTOWN Town Nerdcast. SM for small Town Nerdcast. And then Instagram, it's all spelled out. Actually, I think on Snapchat I have it as Bry-Fy podcast, but I post things and with my family and stuff and some nerd stuff on there and just being a goof. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. And Facebook, all the same. And even YouTube. I almost forgot about YouTube. If you look up Small Town Nerdcast on YouTube, I have highlight videos from video games that I've been playing. And also all the episodes here can be found over there. So if you want to listen to it on YouTube, like for whatever reason you can't get on your phone or can't listen on your phone, you can listen on a computer. But that's all that I have for this week, and hopefully I see you guys next week. Later.